Have you ever wondered why certain behaviors repeat themselves in your life like a silent cycle? As if something inside you sabotages your relationships, your decisions, your deepest feelings, even when everything seems to be going well. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist and father of analytical psychology, believed that these hidden patterns have deep roots, more precisely, in his childhood. And perhaps the scariest thing about it all is realizing that these traumas are not visible on the surface. They hide silently in the folds of the unconscious and guide us without us realizing it. Imagine a child living his first years of life. She is sensitive, vulnerable, entirely open to the world. Every gesture, every word, every silence left by the adults around is interpreted by this child as an absolute truth. A look of rejection can become an emotional wound. Momentary abandonment can turn into a constant fear of not being loved. Jung stated that the inner child never disappears, it just shuts up, but it continues to live within us, influencing who we are and how we see the world. Many of our fears, insecurities, and destructive behaviors are actually unconscious attempts to protect this injured child. When we feel rejected and shut down emotionally, it can be an echo of a childhood where love was conditional. When we sabotage ourselves professionally, it may be a reflection of an internal voice that, way back when, learned that it wasn't good enough. Jung called these unconscious layers complexes and explained that childhood trauma does not need to be extreme to leave marks. It is enough to have been interpreted by the child's mind as abandonment, humiliation, rejection, or fear. Now stop for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, do you remember a moment in your childhood when you felt invisible, inappropriate, scared? Maybe that memory is buried, or maybe it still pops up every now and then, like a whisper in the back of your mind. The truth is that we don't need to remember everything clearly to be guided by these brands. The unconscious keeps every fragment, even what we consciously forget. What Jung proposed to the world was a new way of looking at pain, not as something to be fought or denied, but as an invitation to transformation. Trauma, according to him, is like a wound that, if ignored, becomes infected and contaminates other areas of life. But if welcomed, understood, and integrated, it becomes a strength. This process is called individuation, the path of return to the self, the essence of our being, free from inherited conditioning. And maybe you're wondering, but how do I start this process? How can I heal wounds that I'm not even sure are there? The answer lies in self-observation, in moments of emotional triggers, in exaggerated reactions, in repetitive patterns. Jung believed that the unconscious reveals itself through our automatic behaviors, our dreams, our physical and emotional symptoms. Observing is the first step to integration. Now I want to invite you to reflect how many decisions in your adult life were made out of fear and not freedom. How many times have you said yes, meaning no, just to maintain someone's affection? Can you recognize these attitudes as unconscious attempts to protect a wounded part of yourself? Leave in the comments a situation that you now see with different eyes. Sharing this can not only free you, but also open space for others to recognize themselves in your story. Let's continue together on this deep dive journey, because understanding your traumas is the first step to regaining the power that you once needed to hide to survive. Childhood can seem distant, almost like a dream, clouded in memory. But what many don't realize is that she never goes away. What we experience during that period, especially in the first 7 years of life, it forms the basis of everything we believe we are, and even more so, everything we believe we deserve. Carl Jung said that the child's unconscious records, not only events, but also unprocessed emotions, unexpressed fears and desires that have been suppressed. And all of this remains there, operating as a hidden system, controlling our reactions without us even realizing it. Have you ever stopped to think about why some people are so afraid of making mistakes? Or why do certain adults not tolerate criticism, even if it is constructive? Or why is it so difficult to trust, even in those who consistently show love? The answer may lie in childhood. A child who grew up being bullied all the time may have developed a critical, unforgiving inner voice. A child who only received attention when he was sick may unconsciously reproduce physical symptoms as a way of asking for love. These patterns, which Jung called complexes, become emotional cores charged with psychic energy. They form when a child goes through an intense experience, usually without having the emotional tools to understand or process it. Thus, this experience is repressed, pushed into the unconscious. But it doesn't disappear. It stays there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And generally this moment appears in adult relationships, especially in the most intimate ones. How many times have you reacted disproportionately to something small? Have you ever had that feeling that you are being abandoned by someone just because they took too long to respond to a message? Have you ever exploded with anger because you felt rejected, even though you weren't sure that was happening? These are clear signs that something unresolved within you is taking control. And the scary thing is that often these reactions don't come from the adult you are today, but of the wounded child you once were. Jung said that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny. This means that until you heal those childhood wounds, will continue to repeat the same patterns, experiencing the same conflicts, attracting the same types of relationships. Healing is not in avoiding pain, but in having the courage to look at it with compassion and presence. And here comes a crucial question. How can we identify these traumas if we often don't remember them consciously? The answer lies in the symptoms: emotional, mental, and even physical. Chronic anxiety, excessive insecurity, fear of abandonment, constant need for approval, difficulty in imposing limits, toxic relationships that are repeated. All of this can be a manifestation of deep-rooted emotional trauma. The body speaks what the mind is not allowed to say. Now reflect with me. Is there a recurring pain in your life that you try to resolve with rational effort, but which keeps coming back? Any pattern you swore never to repeat, but still find yourself stuck in? If so, that's no coincidence. It's your uncurated story asking to be looked at. And the more we ignore these calls, the more intense they become. Carl Jung shows us that the only way to break this cycle is to descend into the basements of the psyche and find the child we were, abandoned back there. Not to accuse her, not to judge her, but to finally welcome her. Because liberation does not happen when we deny pain, but rather when we offer it what no one gave us at the time: listening, security, and love. If this touched you in any way, share it in the comments. What behavior of yours did you already suspect could have roots in childhood? Do you feel like your inner child is asking for attention? Opening this exchange space is a powerful way to begin healing. Have you ever felt like there is a part of you that you try to hide from the world? A side that carries anger, envy, fear, shame, emotions that were repressed because we were taught they were ugly, wrong, or unacceptable. Carl Jung called this part of our unconscious shadow. And it is precisely in this dark territory of the psyche that childhood traumas take hold. Most strongly, the shadow is not evil in itself. It is the set of everything that has been banished from consciousness, but that continues to exist within us, wanting to be recognized. When we grew up in environments where expressing emotions was unsafe, we learned to hide what we felt. If when we showed sadness, we were ignored, we learned to smile even when everything hurt inside. If by expressing anger we were punished, we learned to swallow the scream and pretend that everything is fine. But repressed emotions don't disappear. They transform into symptoms, behavior patterns, and even psychosomatic illnesses. The wounded child that lives within us does not understand rationalizations. She doesn't know that her parents did the best they could. She only knows that at that moment she felt fear, abandonment, rejection, humiliation, and, based on these intense emotional experiences, he created deep beliefs. I'm not good enough. My feelings don't matter. To be loved, I need to please. I can't trust anyone. These beliefs become the lens through which we look at the world in adulthood. And what we do, without realizing it, is project this pain onto others. Jung said that what we deny in ourselves, we project onto others. If we do not accept our fragility, we condemn the fragility of others. If we don't accept our anger, it explodes in traffic, in arguments, in uncontrolled outbursts. If we deny our need for affection, we become cold or dependent. The shadow acts silently but extremely powerfully, and the more we try to appear perfect, the more it becomes stronger. Have you ever found yourself hating a trait in someone that deep down you also carry? Have you ever judged a person for something that, in a moment of honesty, you recognize that you also feel? This is the projection of the shadow, and it is an invitation to look inside, to stop blaming the outside world and start understanding that the deepest answers are within us. Carl Jung stated that the healing process only begins when we have the courage to face the shadow head-on. When we stop fighting it and start talking to it, this does not mean surrendering to what is darkest within us, but rather recognizing that each repressed part carries a message, a wound, a story. And until this story is heard, it will continue to repeat itself. And maybe you're wondering, but how can I recognize my shadow? How can I identify what I have repressed? The answer lies in the triggers. What bothers you most about others is usually a reflection of what you reject in yourself. The most intense judgments we make are valuable clues about what we are trying to hide. So the next time something or someone triggers a strong reaction in you, stop and ask, what is this trying to show me about myself? This is subtle, deep, and often uncomfortable work, but it's also the most transformative thing you can do. Jung said that the shadow only loses its power when it is brought into the light of consciousness, and that light begins to shine when we allow ourselves to feel, recognize, and finally embrace what we previously rejected. Now reflect with me. What emotion did you learn to hide as a child? What part of you did you have to bury to be accepted? Share in the comments if you feel like it. Sometimes putting it into words is the first step to freeing what has been trapped. For so many years, Carl Jung said that a healthy man is not one who has no wounds, but one who knows where they are and has learned to live with them. And perhaps this is one of the most important truths you can hear today. Because as long as you keep trying to be strong all the time, invulnerable, unattainable, you will continue moving away from the most authentic part of you, the child that still lives inside you. This child did not disappear. She is there, in your insecurities, in your interrupted dreams, in your hidden sensitivity, in your automatic reactions. It appears when you feel alone, when you are afraid of not being enough, when you need support and don't know how to ask for it. It appears in your love life, in your family conflicts, in fears that seem irrational. And she doesn't want you to ignore her. She wants you to come back for her. Many think that growing up means leaving the child behind, but Jung shows us the opposite. True maturation only happens when we recognize, care for, and reintegrate this injured child into our being. This is not going backwards. It is not becoming immature, fragile, or dependent. It is, in fact, the most courageous and essential move a human being can make. Look at your emotional origin and heal what has been denied. Reintegrating the inner child means recognizing that he had legitimate reasons to protect himself, to remain silent, to hide. It's listening to your pain, without minimizing it, without trying to correct it, without saying that it's over. Because for the unconscious, nothing happens. Psychological time is not linear like clock time. A childhood pain can be alive today as if it happened yesterday. And how do you reconnect with this child? Start with simple but powerful questions. What did I need to hear back then that I never heard? What was I deprived of and had to pretend everything was okay? What were my true feelings that no one validated? These questions don't have easy answers, and they may not even come immediately, but the simple act of asking opens a door, a symbolic, emotional, spiritual opening. And Jung said that all healing begins with a symbol, with an inner image, being received by consciousness. Sometimes when you close your eyes and imagine your child, you can see him sad, hidden, afraid. This is no illusion. It's your psyche trying to show you what has been waiting for years to be seen. What would happen if, instead of ignoring her, you reached out? If you said to her tenderly, "I see you, I'm here now, you're not alone anymore." This is reconnection. This is integration. And this is so necessary because many of our unconscious choices in adult life are attempts to compensate for that child's pain. The relationship that nullifies us may be a repeat of the environment where we learned that love and control were the same thing. Excessive pursuit of success may be an effort to prove that we are worthy of attention, something we have not felt in the past. Self-sabotage can be a way of punishing a child who deep down still feels guilty for not being good enough to be loved. Have you ever wondered why you insist on certain behaviors, even though you know they are bad for you? Why do you keep going, back to situations that have hurt you before? Perhaps the answer is not in the now, but in what was stuck in yesterday. And that child that still lives inside you is waiting for you to come back, not to rescue her like a hero, but to tell her that there is no longer any need to hide. That now there is an adult available, present and aware to welcome her. If it touched something inside you, write in the comments. What was your biggest pain when you were a child? And what would you have wanted to hear back then? Your story can heal, inspire, and open paths for many others. And most importantly, it can open space for your own healing. Have you ever had physical reactions that seem to have no apparent cause? Anxiety that appears for no reason, a tightness in the chest, a pain in the stomach before certain situations, chronic insomnia or anxiety attacks seemingly out of nowhere. Carl Jung said that the unconscious expresses itself when consciousness is silent, and the body is often the way the soul finds to shout what has been silenced for years. The repressed pain of childhood may not be remembered clearly, but it is felt intensely in the body. Emotional trauma, especially childhood trauma, is not restricted to the psychological level. It manifests itself somatically, that is, it is stored in the body as a cellular memory. Recent studies in neuroscience and somatic psychology confirm what Jung had already intuited decades ago. When an emotion is repressed because it cannot be expressed, it crystallizes in us as tension, pain, energy blockage, and even illness. The child who could not cry, scream, or run away stored all of this in his muscles, organs, and nerves. Think about the number of times you swallowed your tears so as not to bother them. The times you needed to smile when all you wanted was to disappear. In the moments when you heard phrases like, "Swallow that crying," "This is nothing," "Don't be weak," the body heard all this. And he remembered. Unexpressed emotions turn into symptoms, and often these symptoms are chronic because what's hurting isn't just the physical, it's what's underneath. Jung said that the body is the mirror of the soul, and when the soul is hurt, the body carries this pain as best it can. Some people develop recurring back pain as a result of carrying the emotional weight of their family. Others have breathing problems because, symbolically, They feel they have no space to exist. Some are constantly sick because deep down, they only received affection when they were sick. The body repeats the same calls for help that the child tried to make and was not heard. And maybe you're wondering, but how can you differentiate a common physical problem from an emotional manifestation? The answer is in context. When you live in similar situations and always in them feel the same physical discomforts, it's a sign. When, after an emotional conflict, your body reacts, when certain words, places, or people generate physical symptoms, it is your unconscious manifesting itself through matter. But the good news is that the body can also be a path to healing. Techniques such as conscious breathing, meditation, yoga, bioenergetics, among others, help to access deep layers of the psyche that are not accessible only with the rational mind. The body is wise, and when you start listening to him with attention and respect, he starts to release what was stuck. Each tension released can be an emotion that finally has room to come out. Now reflect with me. What physical symptoms have you carried for years that doctors don't fully explain? Is there an emotion you feel that is stuck somewhere in your body? If you want, share in the comments. This is a safe space for listening, where many people can recognize themselves in their story and, who knows, find a key to their own healing process there. Jung knew that there is no separation between body, mind, and spirit. Untreated emotional pain turns into physical weight. And the only way to break this cycle is look with courage at the roots of the pain, welcome the child who is still hurt, and finally, allow the body to release everything it has carried in silence for so long. From a very early age, we learn that to be accepted, we need to behave in a certain way. We discover as children that certain emotions bring us closer to others, while others push us away. We quickly understand that there are sides of us that are welcome and others that should be hidden. So, without realizing it, we begin to build an adapted identity, what Jung called persona. The persona is the social mask we use to present ourselves to the world. It is necessary in many moments of life as it helps us function in society. But the problem happens when we completely identify with this mask and forget who we are behind it. And that's exactly what happens to most people who grew up with unresolved trauma. They build a persona based on survival, not authenticity. Think of a child who learned that he was only valued when he got good grades. She may grow up believing that she needs to be impeccable to deserve love. Your persona will be that of the perfectionist. Now imagine a child who was ridiculed for expressing feelings. She may become a cold, rational, distant adult, but this is just armor, an attempt to protect herself from the pain she once felt. On the outside, she looks strong. Inside, you're dying for connection. And what is most devastating about this process is that the persona, over time, crystallizes. We come to believe that we are this adapted version of ourselves. We don't realize that our life choices, our relationships, our careers, everything is being guided by this identity built to avoid pain. And so we spent years, sometimes decades, living a life that is not truly ours. Carl Jung said that in order to awaken, we must first recognize that the persona is not our true self. It's just a role we learn to play to survive emotionally. And when we carry childhood trauma, this role tends to be very rigid, defensive, and lonely. How many times have you found yourself pretending to be okay when, inside, you were in pieces? How many times have you laughed in situations where all you wanted to do was cry? How many times did you accept what you didn't want just to maintain the image of a good, educated, calm person? These are the persona's reflexes in action, and although useful in some contexts, it becomes a prison when we can no longer get out of it. Jung stated that individuation, the process of becoming who you really are, only begins when we have the courage to take off that mask. But to do this, we need to feel safe. We need environments, people, rituals, practices that allow us to show our truth without fear of being hurt again. And here comes the importance of deep self-knowledge. It's not enough to want to change. We need to understand what we are changing and why. Have you ever noticed any mask you created to adapt to the world? Have you ever felt like your external image doesn't match what you really feel inside? Share in the comments if you like. Sometimes naming our persona is the first step to letting it go. Because, as Jung said, there is no awakening without confrontation with one's own darkness. And often, that darkness is camouflaged in something that the world applauds, but that you know is not you. Taking off your mask may seem risky, but continuing to use something that no longer serves you is much more painful. The good news is that you no longer need to protect yourself like you did when you were a child. Now, there's a conscious adult in you, and he has the power to rewrite your story. If you look closely, you will notice that human relationships are the greatest laboratory of the soul. It is in contact with others that our wounds emerge more strongly. And this is no coincidence. It's the unconscious trying to show us what still needs to be healed. Carl Jung said that what bothers us most about others is usually a reflection of what we have not yet accepted in ourselves. And the name of it is projection. Projection happens when we displace internal content onto another that we cannot recognize as ours. For example, if you grew up in an environment where showing vulnerability was a sign of weakness, you may be deeply irritated by people who cry, who open up, who show fragility. This doesn't mean you're insensitive. It just means there's a part of you that has learned to reject this aspect and therefore suffers from seeing it on the outside. But the most impactful thing is realizing how this affects our most intimate relationships. Loving relationships, deep friendships, and family bonds are what activate our shadows the most. Do you know why? Because it is in these spaces where we allow ourselves or try to be more authentic. And the more intimacy, the more the layers of protection fall. The wounded child that lives within us feels exposed, and as a result, begins to react. How many times have you overreacted to an attitude from your partner? Have you ever felt abandoned by something simple, like an unanswered message? Have you ever been irrationally afraid of being left behind, even though you are in a stable relationship? These triggers do not come from the present. They are echoes of the past, activated by the experiences of now. And what often happens is that, without realizing it, we begin to demand that others heal our wounds. We expect others to treat us as we would like to have been treated as children. We want to be heard, welcomed, loved unconditionally, not for who we are today, but for who we were and were not recognized. The problem is that no healthy relationship can work when we put the responsibility for fixing ourselves on the other. Jung said that every encounter is a reunion with parts of ourselves that we have not yet integrated. Each person who enters our life can be a mirror, a teacher, a messenger. Sometimes what attracts us to someone is precisely what we deny in ourselves. Other times, what drives us away is what we are afraid to acknowledge. But in all cases, the other is an invitation to look inside, to review our stories, to heal what still hurts. This awareness changes everything, because instead of blaming others for our pain, we come to understand that the other just activated something that was already there. It's not about what the other person did or didn't do. It's about what it awakened in us. This is the great turning point of self-knowledge. The pain we feel in relationships is not new. She is old. It was just played. Now I ask you, what pattern do you repeat in your relationships? Is there a pain that always comes back, a wound that never heals? Write in the comments. When you name what you feel, you begin to take control. You stop being a hostage to pain and start being its observer. And this, as Jung taught us, is the first step towards integration. Relationships can be the battleground of our psyche, but they can also be the fertile soil of our healing. When we are aware that we are projecting, we have the chance to stop, breathe, and ask, what in me is asking to be looked at through this conflict? The answer may not come immediately, but it always will, because the unconscious speaks all the time. And when we're ready to listen, he whispers truths that change everything. Have you ever had the feeling that you are reliving your parents' story? That no matter how much you try to do things differently, you end up repeating the same mistakes, the same behaviors, the same emotional wounds? Carl Jung said that what we do not face in our consciousness reappears as destiny. And often, this destiny is called unconscious loyalty. From a young age, we absorb not only the behavior of the adults around us, but also the pain, the fears, the unresolved traumas of the family lineage. It's as if a child's psyche said, if my mother suffers in silence, I need to keep quiet too. Or, if my father never received support, I can't ask for help either. And so, even without meaning to, we begin to carry burdens that are not ours, as an unconscious form of belonging. Jung understood that to break with these patterns, it is necessary to do more than want. We need to recognize that part of our suffering is not only individual, but ancestral. The familiar unconscious is like an undercurrent. It shapes how we love, how we work, how we see ourselves, how we sabotage ourselves. And many of our pains only make sense when we broaden our gaze and see the context from which we came. How many times have you said, I will never be like my parents? And, years later, found yourself replicating exactly what they did. Sometimes, this repetition comes in disguise. You may not scream like your mother did, but you have the same feeling of not being heard. He may not abandon him like his father did, but he emotionally withdraws from relationships. The shape changes, but the pain is the same. And this happens because trauma, if not healed, becomes an inheritance. But the good news is that this cycle can be stopped, and the turning point begins with an internal decision to no longer continue on autopilot, to look with compassion at your story and at the same time firmly enough to say, enough, enough of repeating what has already caused pain in so many generations, enough of perpetuating patterns that suffocate, limit, and make you sick. Jung said that the process of individuation requires courage, the courage to be who you are, even if it displeases those who shaped who you should be. Breaking inherited patterns does not mean rejecting your family, but rather honoring them through healing. Because by healing within yourself what has been repressed, silenced, or distorted, you also liberate your ancestors and future generations. This is so deep that many don't even realize how much their current pain has roots way back. Chaotic relationships, difficulty thriving, fear of taking a stand, constant feeling of inadequacy. All of this may have started long before you were born, but now you are aware, and with awareness comes responsibility, not blame, responsibility, the choice to do different. And you? Have you noticed patterns in your family repeating themselves in your life? Have you ever caught yourself reacting like someone you swore never to imitate? Write in the comments which pattern you feel you inherited and want to transform. This exercise of recognition is, in itself, a liberation. When we name pain, we take it out of the shadows and into the light. Jung said that unintegrated pain screams, but the pain received transforms. And when you have the courage to break cycles, you become not just the healer of yourself, but the breaking point in a long chain of silent suffering. You become the conscious link in an unconscious lineage. After crossing so many internal paths, confronting so many shadows, and facing deep truths about your childhood, about your patterns, about what was inherited and silenced, perhaps a question will begin to echo more strongly within you. And now, who am I? Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, this deep movement of reconnection with the essence, is the true meaning of life. It's what we're looking for when we want to return to ourselves, even if we don't know how. Jung called this essence self, the organizing center of the psyche, what we are in our purest form, before the wounds, before the masks, before the adaptations. But to awaken the self, it is not enough to just intellectually understand our traumas. You have to experience them, integrate them, and finally let they stop defining us. The injured child will continue to exist, but no longer as someone at the wheel of your life. She will be in the back seat, welcomed, safe, protected by a conscious adult who now understands her value, her limits, and her choices. True healing begins when we stop looking for a fix and start looking for integration. When we accept that the parts we previously rejected, our anger, our sadness, our fragility, are not defects, but legitimate parts of our story, and that we will only be whole when we stop dividing our interior between what can be seen and what needs to be hidden. This awakening does not happen all at once. It is slow, subtle, sometimes painful, but it's real. It starts when you allow yourself to say no for the first time without guilt, when you realize you no longer need to prove anything to anyone, when you look in the mirror and for the first time in years recognize your own gaze, a calmer, more present, more honest look. Jung said that the self is like an internal magnet, constantly calling us home. And every crisis we face, every relationship that takes us apart, every loss that makes us stop, all of this is part of a process that seems like chaos, but is actually reorganization. Life is not against you. She's trying to wake you up so that you can see yourself, so that you stop abandoning yourself. And maybe you're wondering, how do I know if I'm on the right path? The answer is not in formulas, methods, or external validation. She is at her inner peace. You know you're getting closer to your true self when you start to feel relief from simply being who you are, when you no longer need to pretend, when you no longer need to shape yourself, when decisions come from the heart, not the wound. Of course, the pain still appears. Of course, at times the inner child will still cry. But now, she is no longer alone. Now there is someone, you, willing to listen. And that changes everything, because there is nothing more healing than being seen, heard, welcomed. And when you offer this to yourself, your entire system begins to reorganize itself toward authenticity. Now, I want to invite you to reflect. At what point in your life did you most disconnect from who you were? And what have you done today to reconnect with your essence? Share in the comments, because this journey, although personal, is deeply human, and your words can shine lights on other people's paths. The self is not something you become. It's what you always were, but forgot. And now, little by little, he's remembering again. Getting here wasn't just about watching a video or hearing words. It was about going through an internal portal, a journey of recognition, confrontation, liberation, and truth. You looked at the child that still lives within you. He faced the shadows he carried in silence. He recognized the masks he learned to use to survive. And now, perhaps for the first time, you are faced with a new possibility. Live truthfully. Carl Jung did not propose that we erase our pain, but that we honor it. He taught us that every childhood wound holds a key, and that behind suffering, there is power. Contaminated anger can be transformed into conscious action. Ignored sadness can turn into sensitivity. The feeling of abandonment can transform into real presence. Past humiliation can turn to compassion for yourself and others. Wounds, when looked at with awareness, become wisdom. Maybe now you understand why certain relationships fell apart, why certain cycles repeated themselves, why you felt empty even when surrounded by people. Perhaps you can see that your most intense reactions were not weakness, but reflections of unwelcome pain. You may realize that what you sought from others, attention, affection, validation, was what you needed to learn to give yourself. And all of this isn't just self-help and deep self-knowledge. It is living psychology. It is incarnated spirituality. You spent years trying to protect yourself, and that's understandable. The child you were did the best he could with the resources he had. But now, with the awareness you have, you no longer need to use the same defense mechanisms. Now there is an adult in you who can decide, choose, heal. You are no longer a hostage to pain. You are the space that can welcome it and make no mistake. The individuation process is not linear. You will stumble, you will doubt, you will fall and get up several times. But now, the difference is that you know where your pain comes from. She has a name, it has shape, it has origin, and that already changes everything, because when we understand our history, it stops controlling us. Jung said that the unconscious rules our life until it becomes conscious. And you are already aware. Maybe there is still fear. Fear of being rejected for showing who you really are, fear of losing people, fear of abandoning old versions, and all of this is natural. But ask yourself, do you want to continue living a life where your essence is suffocated, or are you ready to live a life where your truth can finally breathe? The choice is now yours, and no one else can do it for you. You are no longer the child who was beaten silently. You no longer need to hide. It no longer depends on approval. Can you, with love, close old cycles? You can, with maturity, look back and be grateful for the pain that made you grow. You can firmly look forward and say, now I take care of myself. And this care begins with small gestures, with more listening and less judgment, with more presence and less charges, with more silence and less noise, with more truth and less appearance. And if you maintain this commitment, little by little, what was a wound becomes a bridge. What was a prison becomes a portal. What was trauma becomes transformation. I want to invite you now to leave it in the comments. What was the strongest moment of this journey for you? Which part of your inner child needs you most today? Sharing this is more than expressing yourself. It's setting collective healing in motion. Because, as Jung believed, when we heal ourselves, we also heal the world. If you've come this far, know that it wasn't by chance. Something inside you, maybe subtle, maybe screaming for attention, brought you on this journey. A journey that was not just about understanding psychological theories or concepts, but about remember who you really are behind everything you learned to be to survive. Talking about childhood trauma is crossing delicate, deep, and often painful terrain. But it is also making space for truth, for liberation, for healing. As Carl Jung taught, there is no true light without first going through our own darkness. And perhaps for the first time, you are beginning to look with compassion at parts of yourself that you have always judged, hidden, or ignored. This child, who was once silenced, repressed, misunderstood, she's still there asking not for perfection, but for presence. And now you have the awareness that she didn't have. Now you can hear what she felt and say what she needed to hear. You can be for yourself the safe, loving, nurturing adult that perhaps no one was at that time. Remember, trauma does not define who you are. It shaped parts of your journey, but it is not your destination. From the moment you look at pain, truthfully, without judgment, something magical happens. You stop being the victim of your story and start being the author of your own healing. It doesn't erase the past, but it transforms the way you carry it. If something inside you moved today, if any memory came to the surface, if any emotion that was dormant began to move, know that this is a sign that the process has begun. Don't try to rush it. Don't worry about immediate answers. Just keep walking with awareness and presence, because true healing is not a destination, it is a path. And if this video made sense to you, I want to invite you, subscribe to the channel right now. Here you will find a safe space to delve into deep topics like this with respect, depth, and truth. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos, because this journey of self-knowledge, healing, and reconnection with the self is just beginning. And more than that, share in the comments. Which part of this journey touched you the most? What insight stuck with you? Which part of your inner child needs you most right now? Your story could be the missing key to someone else's healing. Thank you for trusting the process. Thank you for existing. And above all, thank you for having the courage to look within. You are much more than the pain you carry. You are the consciousness that now begins to free it.